meeting of the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Commission to order. I'd like to call on Commissioner Blanchard for the Pledge of Allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ms. Falcon. Roll call, please.
Joe McPherson,
Here.
Allison Sarah,
Here.
Andrew Blanchard,
Here.
Brandon McQuarrie,
Here.
Bill Hogan,
Here.
Gene Reynolds,
Here.
Kevin Cabrera,
Here.
Mr. Chairman, Civil Commissioners, and Laura, Secretary Monse is also present.
Thank you, ma'am. Members, you have a copy of the meeting minutes from the January 6th commission meetings. Do I hear a motion on the adoption of the minute?
I make a motion, we accept it.
Commissioner Blanchard,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Hogan. Is there any comments? Any questions? All those in favor of adoption signify by saying aye.
Aye.
The minutes are adopted. The next item on our agenda is approval of the February 3rd, 2020 agenda. Do I have a motion for the adoption?
So move.
Moved by Commissioner Blanchard,
Second.
seconded by Commissioner Reynolds. Did we have an amendment to the agenda?
Mr. Chairman, Randy Meyer, Assistant Secretary, Office of Wildlife. As y'all are aware, yesterday we sent out a news release indicating that we have had our first presumptive positive CWD case in Louisiana. We have would like to provide an update to the commission, as well as if there's any action that the commission feels appropriate to take in terms of, we're prepared to do a DE, but we wanted to, get some more information, get a final, I guess, clearinghouse from Ames, Iowa Vet Lab as that positive. So I guess we would ask that the commission would consider amending the agenda and adding that to the docket.
Okay, and if the commission desires to do that, I guess it would go in after the after item 10, probably. We become 11.
I'll make the motion.
Commissioner Hogan moves that we move the agenda, seconded by Commissioner Sinceri. All of those in favor of amending the agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is moved. Now, do I have final approval of the agenda? Can I have a motion for that? Okay. Do I have a second?
Second.
All right, second by Mr. Reynolds. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, the agenda is amended and approved. All right, the next thing on the commission's agenda is special announcements and personal privilege. I want to take the opportunity to welcome our two new commission members, Kevin Segura and Brandon DeQueer. They're going to be extremely welcome additions with their backgrounds, expertise, and intellectual knowledge. And I've encouraged both of them to not be just passive members of the commission, but to use their abilities and their backgrounds to help improve the outdoor experiences for the people that we represent. And I'm going to ask Kevin, I believe you're the senior appointee by a few days, so I'm going to call on you and see if you have any comment. Then I'm going to call on the secretary and let him add his welcome.
All right, thank you very much. Yeah, I'm just excited and honored to be able to serve the people of Louisiana and serve on this commission and try to do great things to help preserve our resources. And looking forward to working with all of you guys and the department and staff. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Queer.
Good morning, everyone. It's an honor and a pleasure to serve on this Board of Commissioners, and I definitely look forward to carrying out the good work that the commission has done in years past with hopefully some measure of wisdom that I can bring. I know Joe has set the bar pretty high about this knowledge and expertise that we may have, but I'll bring what I can.
Thank you. Mr. Secretary.
Mr. Chairman, I've worked in the past with Mr. Segura in the alligator industry. He's probably a third or fourth generation fur industry. Comes from a family that's been dealing with furs for a long time. That's the position he's filling, commercial and representing the fur industry. And Mr. Brandon is a member at large. May welcome him. I think I made a misstatement, Brandon, and I want to apologize and correct that statement. And when we brought y'all in and kind of introduced y'all to everything, I said that you were going to be the first African-American to serve on the commission. That was not so. I was corrected by Miss Susan, who has a lot of experience, and said that we had an African-American served in the 90s. But it's certainly been a long time since we've had that kind of representation. Certainly welcome you. And I know that from doing a little background on you, you're certainly very capable of helping us to accomplish what our goals are, and that's to protect the resources of Louisiana. I want to welcome both of y'all and look forward to working with you and offer my department as how can you say that, as a dictionary of knowledge when you need something, or an encyclopedia of knowledge. If you need something or you need some education in certain particular areas, don't hesitate to reach out. I've instructed by the way, Mr. Chairman, I've instructed my secretary to put together a pamphlet or a booklet like the legislature does with all the legislators. But I want to do it department-wise so that if you visit an area of the state or a WMA, you will have the contact persons there, the names and a picture of those people, so that you'll have more access and more information for you to be able to visit those facilities and know who's in charge and who can take you around and give you whatever information you need. So we're working on that. With that being said, I'd like to congratulate my Assistant Secretary of Wildlife on his birthday today, 54 years old. I can't remember back that far, but he's 54 years old today. Randy Myers, happy birthday. At this time, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to, the Louisiana Wildlife and Fisheries Foundation, for those new members, we have a foundation set up that helps us work with NGOs and private partnerships that give us money to do some of the things that we don't have in our budget to do. They have a short presentation to give to you about a new partnership that we're about to embark on.
Thank you, committee members. Thank you, Chairman. Missy asked if, she said she's not the biggest fan of public speaking. I said, well, I don't mind looking like an idiot, so I'll take over. So I'm really excited to say the foundation is a 501c3, works with the department. All the money that they generate is spent on behalf of the department. And so they've been working with a brewery out of Monroe called Flying Tiger for the last couple of years to sort of create a conservation beer. And the beer, 5% of all the beer sales will go to a conservation project that the department has. For the first sort of year and some months until they come up with a new one. It's going to go to the Blue Wing Teal Telemetry Study, Banding and Monitoring Project at the foundation. So there's a display in the back that shows a picture of shows kind of a picture of the beer with the blue wing teal on it. And just know that we're excited about the partnership. We're excited about the additional revenue that could go into sort of the projects. As y'all know, we're always a self-funded agency looking for creative ways, and just want to commend the foundation for their partnership with this company to try to raise additional dollars that's going to benefit the department. Missy, you have something you'd like to say?
Good morning. Yeah, so with this program or this partnership, every year, our big kickoff for this year will be at Wild Night in the fall. And so we'll kick this off for 2022 and through 2023 through Wild Night. 5% of the proceeds of the Dewdrop beer, the brand Dewdrop, will go to the Blue Wing Teal. We'll make an announcement next year at Wild Night on the next conservation project. So every year, there'll be a different conservation project that the proceeds will go to. And the beer won't change, but the can art will change. So we're hoping, that will bring awareness to the programs and to the foundation and all the great things the department does do.
And dollars,
Excuse me?
and dollars.
Yes, yes.
Brian, do you need the commissioner's keys for samples?
I thought of that. So I do have a landing page on my site, and they're working with Crescent Crown, and they're starting to put it in stores around Louisiana. There are a couple in Mississippi that will carry the beer. But once they're going to give me weekly updates on which locations are carrying the beer. And then I'll have something people can download from our website on where you can find the beer. If you have a certain location that you always go to, whether it's a pub or, a liquor store, whatever, grocery store, and you want to see it there, by all means, either let me know or let them know, say, hey, we want Dewdrop. So
Thank you.
we're excited. Thank you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman, we shouldn't have a problem. This ought to be really successful because we don't have a shortage of drinkers in Louisiana.
No, Louisiana's the perfect state for it.
What we're being told is this is perfect craft beer for crawfish boil time. So we'll see.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Well, thank you.
Commissioners, I wanted to use this as an opportunity to kind of publicize something that I thought was great, and that was the fact that LWF is a recipient of the American Fisheries Society's 2021 Sport Fish Restoration Outstanding Project. And they put in your folder an article from the summer edition of the Conservationist on Bussy Break, WMA, and the work that was done there. We had received a presentation on it, and just an outstanding project. And I thought it was worthwhile to try to make mention of it, to recognize the hard work of our staff in achieving that project and being able to be awarded this. And I'd like to call on the secretary or Mr. Banks, whoever, to let us know who were the key personnel involved in this project, and give credit where it's due. Mr. Banks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This gives me great pleasure for you all to recognize the staff and for us to recognize the staff today. Bussy Break Wildlife Management Area, the centerpiece of that management area is Bussy Break Reservoir, which is a project that our staff has been working on for a number of years now. And they worked hard to renovate that reservoir, restock the reservoir, make quite a bit of improvements to the reservoir so that the anglers will find a much better experience there. We built some dock facilities. We improved the back down, the boat launch area with a wave break. The staff worked to cut boat lanes through some of the stump fields that are in the reservoir. So it's really a wonderful place to go fishing. It's already produced the state's #2 white perch this year. So it's already yielding quite a bit of results, very positive results. And so I wanted to recognize some staff who are here today with us. There are 3 main staff that worked on this project, and I'd like for them to stand up so they can be recognized. And then I'll also recognize some additional staff who are with us today who also work on the project. But the primary lead on this project was our biologist manager, our head fisheries biologist out of Monroe. His name is Ryan Daniel, and he made the trip all the way from Monroe today to be here. Thank you, Ryan, for all the work you did. Another staff member who was integral in getting this project accomplished is our fisheries facility coordinator, and his name is Billy Goche, and he's in the audience here. Billy is an architect by profession, and he makes sure that any construction project we have going on in the state is done to our specifications. when we hire a company to go in and build a building or in this case, renovate this reservoir, us as biologists don't always know how to make sure the contractor is following the right specs, using the right materials. Billy is critical in those kinds of projects. And he's somebody that you wouldn't think of plays a critical role in what we do. So he was huge in that. And then lastly, Chase Chatelaine from our fish hatchery at Booker Fowler. He led the effort in restocking that reservoir, not just once, but I want to say multiple times, because I think the first few times we restocked that reservoir, then we had floods come through and wash everything, not necessarily wash everything away, but dilute what we were trying to do. So he worked really hard, he and his staff, on that. A couple of other folks who I want to at least recognize since they're here, because they also worked hard on the project in support, and that's Christy Butler, who is actually our new head of inland fisheries. As some of y'all may know, Ricky Moses, a longtime employee, recently retired, and Christy took over his spot. And Rainey Harlan, who's our operations manager in inland fisheries. So I think the work of the staff, they did a great job on this, and it was clear that they did a great job, because it's not recognized by just us, but it's recognized nationally. And that's a pretty big deal in the world we live in. So thank you very much, staff. Great job.
Let's give them a hand, please. I know we didn't catch everybody that was involved in the project, so if y'all would go back and share this with the rest of your staff, our compliments and congratulations. Major Skinner, you ready for the enforcement report, sir?
Yes, sir. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. For the month of January, we had 5 boating incidents, 5 injuries, and 0 fatalities. 584 written citations, 202 written warnings, and 24 public assists. As usual, I have a few synopsis of some cases that were made this past month. All of these were deer cases, time of year, and that seemed to be the prevalent violation. Enforcement agents arrested a homeless man in Terrebonne Parish for possessing a firearm by a convicted felon, possession of a wild quadruped without the required license, buying or selling deer meat, possession of an untagged deer, failing to comply with deer tagging requirements, and hunting without basic or big game licenses. Agents were on patrol when they observed the subject cleaning a deer in the front yard of his residence in Houma. Agents made contact and found that he did not possess the required hunting license, and he was a convicted felon. Subject told the agents that he bought the deer earlier in the day. The deer and rifle were seized in connection with the case. The subject faces civil restitution totaling $1,624 for the replacement value of the illegally taken deer. A Pierre Park man was cited in Assumption Parish for taking over the daily limit of deer, criminal trespassing, hunting without basic and big game license, failed to comply with deer tagging requirements, failed to comply with hunter orange requirements, and taking illegal deer during an open season. Agents received information that the subject was caught deer hunting on private property by the landowner. Agents responded to the scene and made contact with the landowner and an Assumption Parish Sheriff's deputy, where they learned that the subject was hunting deer on property he did not have permission to be on. The subject admitted to harvesting 2 antlerless deer during a bucks-only season, and he did not possess the required licenses. Agents seized 2 antlerless deer and a rifle in connection with this case. The subject faces civil restitution totaling $3,249 for the replacement value of those deer. Enforcement agents cited 2 men in LaSalle Parish for hunting deer during illegal hours. One of the subjects was also cited for contributing to the delinquency of a juvenile. The other subject was arrested for DWI and for hunting deer with an illegal weapon, possession of an open alcoholic beverage in a motor vehicle, hunting deer from a public road, and failing to comply with deer tagging requirements. Agents were on patrol when they observed a vehicle stopped on the Diversion Canal Levee Road and then heard a gunshot. The agents stopped the vehicle and discovered the operator was intoxicated, a juvenile was present, and an antlerless deer was killed. Agents seized the deer and a 17 caliber rifle. The subject who shot the deer faces civil restitution totaling $1,624 for the replacement value of that illegal deer. Mr. Chairman, this concludes the report, sir.
Thank you, Major Skinner. Any questions or comments of the commissioners? Mr. Hogan? Anyone else? All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it. Okay, Mr. Tuma, you're going to give a report on public comments and potential amendments. Hunting and fishing regulations.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the commission. My name is Tommy Toom. I'm the Director of Habitat Stewardship and Operations for the Office of Wildlife. I'm here to talk to you today about public comment. So for the two new commissioners, want to say hello, introduce myself, look forward to working with you. Unfortunately, if I stay employed, you'll see me here every January through May for the most part, going through this process of proposing the changes to the hunting season rules and regulations and seeing it through the whole public comment through the legislative process and finally publishing it in the Louisiana State Register. So in last month, the department proposed to the Wildlife and Fisheries Commission the changes for the 2022 through 2024 hunting seasons, and that includes the migratory bird seasons, the turkey seasons, small game, and the WMA regulations. So I'm here today to present the public comment for those for the conditionally approved notice of intent. So we'll get started maybe. So public comment received is from the period of January 6th through, actually, it should be February 3rd. I don't know why it didn't save my changes this morning, but I did receive one last night. So that should be February 3rd, 2023. We did have 35 comments related to the proposed changes. Every comment I have received has been by email. And then we had 5 comments received, just general hunting seasons and regulation comments that's not associated with any of the changes that we proposed last month. In your packet, you have a public comment summary, the first page. The second page is actually my summary of the individual comments from those persons that emailed me. And then I also send, or Miss Susan, I shouldn't be taking credit for her because she's going to be giving me the stink eye, but she sent you a copy of all the emails. That way, in case I'm not comprehending it correctly, you can look over them yourselves. I did receive one email late last night that you did not receive in your package, and that was from the same individual that you received the email yesterday. He is requesting that the private lands adjoining Richard K. Yancey have the same either sex days as Richard Yancey. So full disclosure, I will, and that falls under the Area 1 deer regulation since that's private property. And you can see the copy you have, the very first bullet or topic is Area 1 deer regulations, 2 opposed to what we have currently. So in all, 35 comments related to the proposed changes in the notice of intent. We also have those 5 comments received, just general hunting regulations that we did not propose any changes. So just some general comments from the public: air rifles, arrow shooting, guns, buck harvest restrictions and restrictions, and one guy wanting just some information on palm to terre WMA. And so with that, I will entertain or try to answer any questions you may have based on the public comment that we received.
Okay, and we do have one person wishing to speak. Any questions or comments of the commissioners? Okay, Mr. Ronald Coco.
Ronald Coco from Falls Parish. I was approached by a bunch of people. We had a spring buyer meeting last week, and people that hunt in spring buyer, especially the fishermen, they want to know why y'all can't put it at noon closing season. Because there's no ducks. For 10 o'clock, there's not a duck hunter left on spring buyer, they claim. And they'd like to get in there and fish it from 12, split the day, half a day with the duck and half a day with the fishermen. And while I was there was other people from Richard Yancey said the same thing too. Most of the places duck hunters are out early. So the rest of the time you just sitting idle and the fishermen could be fishing. So they'd like to see some changes into that. The time limit could be changed from 12 to instead of 2. Teal season closed, or you can hunt at 10 with teal. So.
Okay. It closes at 2 currently, right?
Yeah, 2, yeah.
So they're wanting to know why it would be.
Yeah,
12.
they're just wondering because they're just sitting there. In fact, you talk to some of the people working with wildlife, and the trucks are just lined up waiting to launch their boats at 2 o'clock. And right now at 5:30, it's just about dark, so they'd like to see if they couldn't split, y'all couldn't split it half and half. Since the duck hunters are leaving early, then that's nobody duck hunting, so why couldn't they go fishing early?
All right. Thank you, Mr. Coco.
All right.
You have a general comment on that, Mr. Tooman?
Well, if you're confused about what Mr. Coco was requesting, there's several lakes on Richard Yancey and then Spring Bayou where fishing was kind of interfering with the act of hunting. So we have a regulation in early till season where you cannot fish until 10 p.m. And then there's several lakes, and I'm gonna have to check because I don't know it by heart. At 10 a.m. And then the big duck season, WMA standard is the closures at 2 p.m. for all WMAs that do not have tidal influence. So the WMAs that have tidal influence along the coast, it's legal shooting hours. Okay. So we do have that restriction, and I understand his request. He's just wanting to change the WMA closure from, I guess, just on those two WMAs.
That's the only group that thought was there, you know, they thought about it. He said after 10 o'clock, before there's no duck hunting,
Right. And we can certainly look at it, but the reason why it's standard 2 p.m. is because we want it avoids confusion and more replication or more regulations than may be needed, because we don't want a guy that hunts dewey wheels that's normally closing at 2 to travel 25 miles to Spring Bayou, and it's a 12 p.m. closure, and that may be an enforcement issue. I'm sure there would be some leniency with Chad guys, but it does cause a little bit of confusion. So we actually worked a few years ago to get Salvador, Point of Chien, some other coastal WMAs that we have a 2 p.m. closure on those that aren't. So we can certainly take a look at it, and I can discuss it with our waterfowl program and staff.
Well, I kind of put you on the spot, but I'll follow it up with a compliment. Mr. Tuma, basically every one of those comments where it was a question involved, and if you did like as I did and read the comments, which I'm sure we all did, most of them were more questions than directed comment. And Mr. Tuma takes the time, except for the frequent flyers, that he would spend his whole day answering if he got in a discourse with them. And I want to compliment him on that. I think that's very good. A lot of our job is education, and what he does goes a long way with seasons and bag limits. So I appreciate that. Any other questions or comments? All right, thank you, Mr. Tooman. Oh. Okay, I had you down for 18, but Mr. Moreland. Oh, that was a number you had there. David, I apologize. It had a number there that you was trying to do it.
That's nobody can read my writing. My name is David Moreland, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate your time being here, commission members. I live in East Feliciana Parish. And that's what I'm here to address, the 3 deer limit that we have in Area 4 in East Feliciana Parish. We are not out of deer in East Feliciana Parish. I live 10 miles east of Clinton on Highway 10, about a mile from the Amid River. Every year, and this is every year, there are 6 to 10 deer killed on Highway 10 as I travel to Clinton, picking up grandkids or whatever. Been up there 15 years, that's 150 deer that have been wasted from that. Jesse Hoover, our county agent, who is with LSU, the LSU Ag Center, they have a Master Gardener program, which has become a big major program for them, for LSU. She asks me all the time, what can be done for our master gardeners with the deer eating up their landscape? I said, well, I know they don't want to put up a high fence, but other than shooting them, there's not a whole lot of scare tactics that can be done. Part of East Feliciana is in Area 6. Area 6 and Area 4 have the exact season dates. So what I would propose is you throw all of East Feliciana into Area 6 and give us our 6 deer limit so that we can harvest some deer. Thompson's Creek separates East and West Feliciana, and probably right now as we speak, deer are crossing Thompson Creek, going from one parish to the other. There's no difference in the deer herds there. You probably will hear from other parishes if you did this for us, I was talking to my friend up the road who hunts both in East Feliciana and they have a tract of family land in St. Helena Parish. And he told me this morning by text that the volume of deer they have seen in St. Helena Parish is more than they have ever seen. And Burke, I guess, is over 50 years old. So there's plenty of deer. With CWD being an issue, I would think the department will want to keep deer numbers somewhat low and in balance with the habitat. And so reducing the deer number, having hunters kill more deer would be, I think, a good thing to have. So I'm just asking that you restore the 6 deer limit. And I'm not asking for all Area 4 because I'm not, like I said, I'm here only to speak about East Feliciana Parish, which I have a lot of friends in East Feliciana Parish, and we talk about this every Sunday morning, every Wednesday night during the deer season at church. Why? So that's all I'm asking for. Like I said, throwing East Feliciana back into Area 6 would solve our problem, give us back our 6 deer limit, and allow us to harvest a few more deer. So, Mr. Chairman, Senator, it's good seeing you again today. I don't like coming to Baton Rouge, so you probably won't see me too much. And I've learned over my 50 years of being with this department that biologists that come back to complain don't receive a lot of love. So I'm going to shut up and thank you for your time and all the work that you do. I know you have a hard task.
Thank you, Mr. Moore. For the new commissioners, Mr. Moreland's a former deer study leader for the state, so he's got a little bit of background to rely on. Mr. Toomer?
Yeah, so thank you for your praise earlier. It's not me. I know the relevant person who should answer the topic that's emailed. If it's deer, it goes to Jonathan. If it's waterfowl, it goes to Jason Olsack. So I'm not going to accept all that praise solely. I'll let them know that they do the majority of the work. And I'm a very simple country boy, and all the responses you see that I give are basically learned responses from what Jonathan and Larry Reynolds in the past and these guys that came before me have responded. So I'm fortunate enough to work with great staff and learn from them, I hope. So
You took
moving
all
on
the
from
credit when I was complimenting you privately, but now when everybody's here, well, you got to fess up.
it's called showmanship. All right. I got to lack up what I lack in looks and intelligence. I got to make it up somehow. Okay. So public meeting. We're going to host a Zoom public meeting to discuss the proposed notice of intent on March the 2nd at 6:30. So there's the webinar, the registration exists for that Zoom. We invite all the public to attend via Zoom. It was very difficult. You know, our public meeting has to be held 35 to 40 days after January 20th or publishing in the state register. So with Good Friday being on March the 1st and then backing up against the weekend, it was or I should say the holiday, Mardi Gras holiday occurring on that Tuesday and then backing up to through the weekend. The second, even though it's Ash Wednesday, that was really the only day that we kind of make this public meeting work. So if you get some complaints about that, that's why we had to choose that March 2nd date. And then, as always, we're going to receive public comment for the notice of intent through March the 4th. That can be submitted directly to me through letter, mail, phone, or through my email. And like I said, all the comments this year were submitted via email. So if we have no questions on public comment, I guess we can move to the next part of my presentation.
Commissioner Sincere.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on East Feliciana Parish and, 4, 6, and does the department have any feelings on that?
Well, I have feelings on it, but it's probably more appropriate for Jonathan.
Enforcement as well as wildlife.
Well, Jonathan, are you prepared to make a statement on that?
I don't have any data. Jonathan Bardlawn, Deer Program Manager, Louisiana Department of Wildlife and Fisheries. Thank you. Commissioner Sinceri, I don't have any data prepared. The reason behind the move in deer area 4 from a 6 deer limit to a 3 deer limit at the time was tied to a few different things. One in particular was browse survey data we were getting from DMAP clubs as well as lactation data. So what we were seeing, at least in general, were lower browse indices, meaning the pressure put on those habitats that are enrolled in a program. Now, those programs do not, the properties enrolled in that program do not represent every property, obviously, within those parishes and the deer area. They only serve as a sample of what's out there. So we noticed some declining browse indices. In addition to, we saw lower lactation rates, which typically would not be the case. Normally, as deer pressure on available resources goes down, deer condition goes up. And then obviously as deer numbers go up and pressure on available resources increases, typically deer productivity starts to decline. So there's always a balance there. But we saw a couple of indices that we were tracking. What we had there, though, was limited either sex days. So unlike most of the state where you can harvest an antlerless deer any day of the season, we had a limited number of either sex days. But we were receiving public requests for more flexibility in the ability to harvest an antlerless deer. So what we did is we looked at the number of hunters killing 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6 deer, took into account what the ratio of bucks to does were, and more or less tried coming up with a number that if we offered antlerless harvest throughout the season, what would basically be the trade-off? What number would we have to get down to compensate for that based on a projection? So we did, we proposed 3, but rather than implementing it, we tied it to our annual mail survey, which dates back to 1970. It goes out to 6% of licensed hunters. We're able to ask that question, stratify that sample just from deer area 4 hunters. And in area 4 at that time, they were offered this. They were offered basically 2 options, not 5, because we're going to do one of 2 things. We were either going to maintain a 6 deer limit with a limited number of antlerless deer days, or we were going to allow you to harvest an antlerless deer any day of the season in deer area 4, but you would not be able to harvest more than 3 deer, no more than 2 of which could be bucks, no more than which 2 could be does, but a total of 3 maximum. And 2 out of 3 hunters that hunt in deer area 4 responded that they would prefer the option of being able to harvest an antlerless deer any day of the season with a 3 deer limit. So based on that process where we reached out to the public through survey, we decided on that particular option and have implemented it. What you would have anticipated was that the numbers, this is often the case with data. And those of you who deer hunt realize just how passive deer hunters are. They don't necessarily shoot every deer that they see. It's often when you return from hunting, it's what did you see, not necessarily what did you harvest. What I would have anticipated was an increase in antlerless harvest as far as the percentage of the harvest, and I would have anticipated a decrease in total harvest. But what we actually observed in the years that followed the change was the opposite. We actually have seen an increase in the number of deer harvested in deer area 4 since reducing the limit from 6 to 3. So why? Well, we look at the number of hunters that report 1, 2, or 3 deer. We simply have seen an increase in the number of hunters reporting 1 deer. But you would quickly think that, well, because they can harvest an antlerless deer any day of the season is because they're just shooting more does. Actually, no. The percentage of bucks and does is within 1% of what it was prior to the change. So when we look at the season segment, the years that included the previous structure and compare them to the years since, we've basically, the percentage of females in the bag has gone from 38 to 39%, which for all intents and purposes is no change at all. But it's the percentage in that case, but it's a percentage of a greater number. So I don't have the percentage of increase off the top. I can't remember off the top of my head. It's not great, but it is significant. It's somewhere in the 5 to 10% range. So we've seen a slight increase in harvest, basically the same percentage. And it was something that was supported by 2 out of 3 hunters. So it was just an option. It was one or the other. When we went with that option, it was based on public. But what we can do and what we should always be doing is continuing to evaluate not only that data, but also look at some of the same variables that we used as triggers to make the recommendation in the first place. So, I commend Mr. Moreland for taking his observations in the contacts and comments he has received and bringing them forward, making us aware of that. Because it is proof that, we always need to be evaluating and looking. So we are gathering that data, but we need to visit those same variables that we used as triggers in the first place. And we also ought to consider asking that question again to see if there's been a change in preference of the deer limit. I do receive comments, and the majority of comments I receive, this is one of the very few things that we made a change, and I actually received comments to not make a change. That is very unusual. Very seldom do you receive comments to leave things as they are. But as we all know, the comments we receive don't necessarily represent the majority of hunters out there in that deer area. They simply represent a segment of hunters. So the mail survey in this case would be a good tool to use to kind of get a handle on what the majority of hunters in that particular deer area desire. If indeed they do desire an increase in limit, and the management variables that we used as triggers point to a need to increase harvest further, then I think Mr. Moreland's recommendation should be followed. But I believe we should answer the question and use that method in doing so.
Mr. Chairman, thank you very much, Jonathan, for that explanation, because that's very helpful. If you can, help us with maybe just having the amount of deer over a certain period of time that could, show some kind of average or changes that have occurred, along with that male, antlerless and antlered
Yes, sir.
deer and how many are harvested and all. That could be helpful too for us.
Yes, sir.
Over a certain time frame.
Yes, sir.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
It would be all those factors, and that's exactly what I was going to suggest is that we look at those indices. The brow survey would tell us what the herd health was and all that, the lactation. And certainly Mr. Moreland understands all that, and I assume has access to all that information, or is that available publicly?
No, it's not publicly available, but it's certainly something we can share. And it's something that we have as a department.
And it sounds like with the speckled trout issue, we'll hear about things. Part of what we look at is public preference, and it seems like that at the First Church of Clinton, they've changed their minds. So we need, if you can do another survey. Jonathan, can we look at this in time to make a change in these rules and regulations? Mr. Toombs answered yes, so he's answering for you.
Not through the survey route, because the survey will actually go out after the end of turkey season. The end of the survey period is May 31st, I believe. So then that data would have to be compiled and put into report form. And so it would not be within the.
We can't do a limited survey just for that area. That's too burdensome or cumbersome.
Yeah, we never have. Anything is possible, but it would be something certainly that we would probably look to move towards the following year, because it would allow us a longer public comment process. And it would allow us to get some preference information from hunters in that deer area.
That's why we hire people to know what they're doing. All right, thank you.
Yes,
Any
sir.
other
Thank
questions
you.
or comments?
Thanks.
Yeah, I want to thank Jonathan for not having any data available to answer that question. So
Let me make one other comment before we move on. This is out of Jonathan's hometown newspaper, and it's in the Voyage Journal does a 10-year, 30-year, 40-year, 50-year-old column. And 30 years ago, David Bourlaw, I'm sure that's a relative. There's only 2 or 3 Bourlaws in a Boyles Parish. But David Bourlaw of Bucky killed an 8-point buck at the J Flat Hunting Club in Bucky. The deer dressed out at 131 pounds. And the reason I brought this with me is to kind of get everybody to think historically that 30 years ago, that was big news, enough to be in the paper that somebody had killed a 2.5-year-old 8-point buck in a Boyles Parish, which now produces some of the best bucks in the state. Boone and Crockett Mr. Moreland prophesized on, when he retired, that the next state record would come from there. I did my best. I just missed it the other day. But when you look at, this room is named after Joe Herring, Dick Yancey was mentioned, a biologist for the state. Dewey Wills, who had the opportunity to work with and know. But when you think about 30 years ago, there basically was no deer hunting. Ronald and I were talking about, we didn't deer hunt it coming up because there was no deer to hunt. If somebody saw a deer track, they put dogs on it, and after a while, that deer was gone. So that's a progression in the success of our management programs in the state, and unfortunately, we're going to get some bad news that sets all those efforts back quite a bit. But it's amazing what a great job this department and the people that have come before us as commissioners and biologists have done to where we can have these little nuances and the changes that we want, and now it's more about less deer as opposed to more, and quality deer as opposed to browning us down type discussions, and we appreciate that. And I just wanted to say that and make everybody think about that a little bit. All right.
So, Chairman, to clarify, we're shaking my head. You do have time within this rulemaking process to make an amendment should the commission choose to. I think Jonathan was saying he would not feel comfortable with the department proposing a change based on the limited data that we have. So I just wanted to clarify
That's
why
what we understood. He
Okay,
corrected you.
Okay.
Yes.
And then you made me lose my train of thought now. All right. Oh, so another thing would, it's Jonathan didn't allude to it, but Secretary Myers, Assistant Secretary Myers told me, I think that we would also change it from area 4 to 6, may change the number of dog days that are available. So there's a lot of things that we would need to look at it, because that would affect another user group also. So we would certainly ask that question, but that's another layer of this. Should you be thinking about making a change to the notice of intent? That's another layer that's within this, what Mr. Moreland brought forth today. So, okay.
Thank you. All right. If there's no other comments, we'll move on to number 9.
No, I'm still on number
All
8. Second part is I separated my presentations for some
okay.
clarity. Evidently only my clarity, but I'll try. So last month we presented notice of intent. This month I'm going to come forward and ask you to consider, it's actually amendments. English wasn't my first language, obviously, without the grammar errors I have in my presentations, but we're going over the general and WMA hunting rules and regulations. So pomme de terre, we proposed a change to the firearms bucks only season last month. We're asking you to consider an amendment that would further that concern we have over that habitat and that deer populate or deer herd there, and some recruitment issues we feel like we're having. We would propose to, I guess, move the hunt and reduce the season by 5 days. We've moved that hunt from the end of the season till the second Saturday of December for 2 days. So that'd be a reduction of 5 days. It would also put it in line with the season framework of Grassy Lake, which is just across the way. So we would ask for you to consider it. And then also a regulation on Soda Lake. Now, the Corps of Engineers owns Soda Lake Wildlife Management Area. We have a license agreement for 25 years to operate it as a wildlife management area. They are constantly adding properties to this WMA. They're going to close on a track next Friday, actually, which will increase the size of this WMA. So it makes this regulation not needed anymore. So we would ask that the commission consider to remove these 3 sentences out of the Title 76. And so with that, I'll entertain and try to answer any questions that you may have.
All right. Any questions, any comments? We need to adopt that amendment then?
Yes, sir. So with
Recommendation?
no questions, I would ask for your approval of the proposed amendments.
All right.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we accept the amendments.
All right. Commissioner Sincere moves the adoption of the amendment.
Second.
Mr. Blanchard seconds that. No more comments or questions. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right, the amendment is adopted.
All right, thank you. Again, same public comment period. So we'll take public comment on these two amendments as it's added to the notice of intent. And then we will accept it till March the 4th, and you can get those comments to me the same way as we discussed earlier. So thank you.
Ready to move on to number 9 now?
Yes, sir. If the computer locked up, Joel. So
Receive and
there
consider
we
a
go.
notice of intent on self-clearing permit for Department of Refuges and Wildlife Conservation Areas.
All right, so another notice of intent that we'll look at today. It's a notice of intent for LWF managed properties, rules and regulations. Didn't really know or have this presentation finalized when you got the agenda, so I'm sorry for my title being a little bit different. So Act 356 of the 2021 legislative session made a requirement. So A is just a requirement that's in Title 56. We talked about this a lot last month about making sure that Title 76 and Title 56 are consistent. So this first number A is exactly out of Title 56. So we're just following Louisiana law. It says a valid wildlife management area access permit shall be required for department administered lands, including wildlife refuge and wildlife management and habitat conservation areas. Person under 18 of age are exempt for this requirement. So that's directly out of Title 56. The second part we're adding, we currently have we have estimates of public use on our wetland conservation areas and our refuges. We're proposing, as we have the wildlife management area self-cleared permit app, it's digital. We also have the web portal login where you can do it from your house the day before, up to 24 hours before you check in. We will also provide the kiosk with the paper check in and check out at these locations should the commission adopt this notice of intent. So we're trying to get some, if we had some user data, it would certainly help us either manage the property or direct management or direct funds towards, increasing public use or some habitat issues that we're looking at. So we're proposing to require self-cleared permits on all the aforementioned properties that were in number A. Prohibited activities. So within Title 76, every refuge has its own set of regulations. So we'll be working to try to standardize and make those consistent as we have done with the WMAs in the past. So this is for all refuges or department administered properties. Prohibited activities, operation of drones or unmanned aerial vehicles. It's prohibited on department administered lands. And then airboats, aircraft, personal watercraft, mud-crawling vessel, they would also be prohibited. And that would be consistent with the WMA regulations that we currently have. Moving on, refuge-specific regulations. You see that all I did was add Trinity Island under this regulation. And then I'll move to the next slide. And there's all the things that we deleted from Trinity Island. And the reason for that is there was a public use area on Trinity Island. It's on the Ile-de-Neire Barrier Island refuges. So there was a canal that was there that people could motor their boat up and they could get out and utilize the island historically. We had a dredging project that rebuilt the Ile-de-Neire, Trinity Island, Whiskey Island, Raccoon Island. That canal has been filled in with dredged material, so that canal no longer exists. So there is no reason for Trinity Island to have its own regulations. That was the only thing different was documenting or identifying specific regulations for that canal and that public use area outside of that canal. So there's no reason to have specific regulations for Trinity Island. So we deleted it, and then backwards we just added Trinity Island. So the regulations will be the same for Wine, East, Trinity, Whiskey, and Raccoon Island, which make up the Ile-de-Neire Barrier Islands. I know that's a lot of talking, but I wanted to make sure that everybody was aware of what was going on. And then also Act 356 changed our licenses a little bit. So Wild Louisiana stamp does not exist. So we strike through that. And then it says self-clearing permits are not necessary for any activities. The previous proposal that I gave you actually was going to require self-clearing permits. So we strike through that language here. And then on Elmer's Island, the requirement for a Wild Louisiana stamp is hereby waived in the Secretary's direct. So there is no Wild Louisiana stamp anymore. So we strike through that language right there. Queen Bess, we passed these regulations, I think 3 years ago. We are making these regulations consistent with all of the rest of our barrier islands. They're bird nesting islands and bird habitat. So we're just kind of changing some of this language, and it basically mirrors the same language that I gave you for ill and near for the most part. So we're just making those regulations of those bird islands and those habitats for birds consistent on our refuges. And with that, I know that was a lot and I talk fast. I will entertain and try to answer any questions you may have. And if
Any comments or questions of the commissioners? I have no cards from the public.
so with you have,
Mr. Chairman, that's just cleaning up language. That's all we did right there.
well, the requirement to have a WMA self-clearing permit is a change. I want to make clear, we're not trying to slide under the radar, but it will give us some public use data for these refuges that we currently lack right now.
Oh, that's good.
So
Probably off base here, but when they did away with the Wild Louisiana stamp and all, did that cause some confusion that led to the comments on about the additional cost of going on a refuge or a WMA that we saw in that? Or was that a totally unrelated issue?
no, it was related. So the language I used, you could have a hunting, fishing, Wild Louisiana stamp, Sportsman Paradise. So there was a lot of licenses. What we did was just eliminate, and Cole, if you want to speak to it, they just did away with some licenses, and now it's very clear you need a lifetime license, Sportsman Paradise license, or a WMA access permit, or a license that, basically grants you access to these
The
properties.
question was, did they not realize that they were always charged a fee in the form of a Wild Louisiana stamp, that they just didn't recognize it in the past?
Also, they weren't. Previously, you could have a number of privileges that would grant you access, including a basic fishing license or basic hunt. With the license consolidation and restructure, we actually said to access it, you need this specific WMA access.
Whether you had the others or not.
Correct. And so again, we dedicate those funds, they get reinvested back into upkeep, management, maintenance of these facilities and properties. So there probably is some validity to an increase in cost that happened.
So if there are no other questions, I ask for favorable passage of the notice of intent as proposed.
Any other questions or comments? All right, I'll entertain a motion on the adoption of the NOI.
So move, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Hogan moves the adoption of the NOI, seconded by Commissioner Sinceri. All of those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All right.
Thank you.
And next on our agenda is to receive and consider a declaration of emergency to rescind the supplemental feeding ban in Union and Morehouse parishes. Mr. Bourlon.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Again, Jonathan Bordelon, Deer Program Manager. Today, we're here to propose a rescission of a baiting and feeding ban for Morehouse and Union. This is unrelated to yesterday's news story, which Dr. LaCour will be covering at the end of the meeting. Okay, so in November, a CWD positive deer was detected in Union County, Arkansas, just 7 miles north of the Louisiana line. So in response to that, we proposed a couple of things. We proposed a baiting and feeding ban within the parishes of Union and Morehouse because they were adjacent to that positive in Arkansas. And we also proposed to gather 300 samples from both the Union and Morehouse parish. Our staff was very successful. They were able to gather 340 samples, which were resulted, none of which showed a CWD detection. As a result, the secretary allowed baiting to resume on January 7th. Those results were made available after the January commission meeting, so we could not visit this issue at that time, but the secretary allowed it to resume in the interim. So what we're here today is, since the commission established the DE in the first place to consider making it effective through commission action. And the only other slide I have here is simply just a map of where those samples come from. So the red dot there is the actual positive with a 5-mile line, a 10-mile and a 25-mile line. So you can see most of the forested landscape in those parishes has been sampled. Obviously, there's some voids there where there's agriculture and Morehouse. Also, the only other thing I can offer, there was good cooperation amongst hunters, processors, and taxidermists. During that time, obviously baiting was a very contentious or divisive issue is probably the better term, but we felt it prudent upon that discovery. But without any other detections, our recommendations are to allow things to return as they were prior to. We will continue to have heightened surveillance within this area because of that detection. In addition, Arkansas will be increasing their surveillance on their side of the state line. So with the two states and our increased surveillance, we're going to be looking for the disease much harder than we have in the past, based on that focal point that popped up in November. Any questions?
Questions or comments by the commissioners?
I'd like to.
Mr. Hogan?
Yeah, I just want to tell you how much I appreciate how the department handled this situation. It was unexpected when it came along, and the communication was on point, and there was great cooperation with the processors and most of our individuals in that part of the world, but I appreciate how the department handled the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hogan.
Any other questions or comments? The season is closed there, and I think I was told we don't have any tier 1 clubs in those parishes.
The season is closed there, Mr. Joe. That's actually area 2. So the firearm season would have closed in mid-January. So even with tier 2, we're beyond that threshold now. We did have, I believe, 3 tier 1 clubs, but it's a moot point today.
Okay. Do you know how many additional samples we got after the 340, or is that the total?
Well, the decision and the trigger was set at 300, but we exceeded it to 340. So those were the latest numbers that I had available, unless, obviously there's still road kills. If someone brings a deer to a taxidermist today that they harvested in December,
season harvest, that's
we're
340
pretty
was the
much
total number of samples we had for that area.
correct. Yes, sir.
Okay. All right. So we're basically just ratifying the secretary's actions on this motion.
Yes, sir.
So moved.
Mr. Hogan moves the adoption. Mr. Reynolds seconds it. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, that's approved then. And I think when we amended the agenda, we said we were going to go ahead and add the additional item after this just for continuity.
Yes, sir.
Dr. LaCour.
Thank you, Commissioners. I'm Dr. Jim LaCour. I'm the State Wildlife Veterinarian with the department, and we'll give you a little presentation on chronic wasting disease today. So just for the new commissioners, I'm going to give you just a little brief update or background, on what chronic wasting disease is, to make you more familiar with it in case you're not familiar with it. It is a transmissible spongiform encephalopathy. That's a fancy mouthful of words that means it's a disease that eats holes in the brain. It affects deer and other animals in the deer family, such as elk, red deer, mule deer, etc. But in our case, we're predominantly concerned with white-tailed deer. This disease is spread through saliva, feces, urine, and decomposing carcasses that were infected with the disease. It is a long incubation period on this. Typically, animals take 16 to 24 months to show clinical signs once infected. And it's 100% fatal in deer once it picks up the disease. So this is something that has been in the country. It was first found in 1967 in Colorado. It has moved across the landscape and is currently in 27 states in the union. And unfortunately, it looks like we're about to be number 28 on that list. This disease has never been shown to be contagious to human beings. It is contagious. They did a study and found it was contagious to macaque monkeys, which are not humans, but they're pretty close. And at that point in time, the Center for Disease Control and the World Health Organization recommended that humans not consume animals that were positive for CWD, and that if they hunted in an area that was endemic for CWD, that they should have their harvested animals tested for the disease before consuming the animal. Just a little background on it. But recently we were made aware by the diagnostic lab of a suspect case. They called me. They had a sample that tested positive at the Louisiana Animal Disease Diagnostic Lab here at the LSU Vet School. They did a second confirmatory slide, which was positive, and we'll get into that. This animal it came from was harvested by a hunter in eastern Tensas Parish. It was aged by the biologist to be in excess of 8.5 years old, so it was an old buck. This was a clinical animal. It was emaciated. It was salivating some, and the hunter was able to stalk up on this deer in an open field. So he probably was not in his right mind. The biologist, the hunter, thankfully contacted the biologist, and the biologist was able to obtain the samples necessary, the brainstem and the lymph nodes. Once again, it was tested positive at the diagnostic lab at LSU. They forwarded samples to the National Veterinary Services Laboratory in Ames, Iowa, which is the national lab for confirmation. And they looked at LSU's slide, which was contained, said it was positive. They've cut in additional sections for the NVSL confirmation, and we haven't gotten those results yet back. We expect them soon, but we don't have them yet. So this is a presumptive positive case. Everything indicates that it is positive, but we can't say that for sure till we get that confirmation from Ames. This was a picture that the hunter took of this deer. You can see it is emaciated. You can see it has saliva and ingesta staining around his mouth. If you look at his face, he's got old saliva stains on his face. Some observations by the hunter. Number one, the deer, if you look at his antlers, it has no woody debris in there where the deer was rubbing on trees and bushes. Also, he noted that the little stickers there on the base of the antler were not rounded. They were very sharp. So this animal hadn't been acting like a normal buck. The animal had a smell about it. And when he went to pick it up, the hair slipped off the animal. So the animal was basically consuming his body and going down. This is a map showing the 4 cases closest to us in Mississippi, as well as our target case, our presumptive case. So the white marker there is the Issaquena case, the first one in 2018. Had another one in 2019 to the north of the first one in Issaquena County. We had the yellow marker is the 2021 Warren County case. And then the golden colored one is the most recent Warren County, Mississippi case in 2022. And then our case in Tensas just recently. These are our CWD management zones, as well as Mississippi's management zones, these concentric circles. So the smallest circle is a 5-mile radius from the infected animal. The second is 10 miles and the third is 25 miles. So the 5 mile zone is what we consider the hot zone. That's within a normal range of an animal to move. So that would be where we'd expect to find infection. The 10 mile is a area that's a buffer zone. And then the 25 mile is a surveillance zone. So we can catch dispersing animals that have moved from the infected area outward. And just cleaning that map up, this is what our CWD management zone looks like for this response. Unfortunately, it contains probably 95% of Tensaw Wildlife Refuge. It also contains Big Lake and Buckhorn WMAs. We will, as soon as we get a confirmed positive for NVSL, we'll move forward with our CWD response plan. As you know, this is also in our Monroe region. Those guys were working mighty hard up on the Arkansas response that Jonathan just spoke of. They were also getting samples here in the eastern part because this was an area of concern from the original 2018 Issaquah County case. So this year we had 188 samples in these 3 parishes. If you look at the locations of those samples, a number of them surrounded the area where the deer was harvested. They were right on top of it. If you look at this map, it may be hard to appreciate due to the coloration, but you have samples in the wooded areas, and the areas in between those samples are usually big ag fields where there aren't really deer harvested out a mile into the ag field. So, and this is our, since 2018, we've had 1,275 samples in this region in Franklin, Madison, and Tensaw parishes. 509 samples alone in Tensaw Parish, which is pretty good coverage. When our biologists collect samples from these deer, we have them keep a piece of the tongue and freeze that. It has the same label as the sample has for cross-referencing. And we do this so that we can confirm the origin of this deer through DNA. And I've contacted Dr. Randy DeYoung in Texas. He has quite a bit of data in the Tensaw area as well as Mississippi just across the river. So we are sending the sample from this deer as well as some other deer harvested in that area to Dr. DeYoung, and he can look and see if this animal is native to the area, if he's perhaps more Mississippi genes, although they cross that river all the time. So the genetics are very similar. But we can tell if it's a deer that is not from the area, whether it be an escaped captive or an imported deer. So that work is going on. He expects to have results within a couple of months for us, and we'll certainly update the commission with that information. So some things that worked for us, if we want to think positively about some things. Number one, the hunter called us, which is very important. And if you look at the other states that have found chronic wasting disease, often the first case is a hunter report. So that was very advantageous that the man called us, met with the biologist, and the biologist was able to obtain samples. The biologist incinerated the carcass, which is very important. It didn't decompose on the landscape. Also, this property lies in the Batcher. So there will be some annual flooding, which may dilute infection, sedimentation may cover up some prions on the landscape, the causative agent of the disease. I have no qualms. I'm not thinking this is going to stop CWD from spreading in the state, but certainly that could slow the spread of it in the state if the environment is cleaned up by Mother Nature a little bit. So those are positive things in this case, if there is a positive. And just statewide, this is our surveillance this year. Each one of those dots is a location where one or multiple samples was collected. We've collected 1,545 samples to date, and 1,544 of them were not detected. So that's the good news. Any questions for me?
Questions, comments? Dr. LaCour, tell us first, what is left of the season there?
There,
Just tier one?
there's a little bit of tier one, and Jonathan may know how many clubs there are in that region. I do not know. I don't think it's many though.
Chairman McPherson, there's 38 DMAP clubs in Tensall Parish, but in the particular, when you're referring to tier one with the extended season, there are only 2 that have an extended option. There are none in Franklin, and there are also 2 in Madison. So we're talking about 4 tier one DMAP clubs. So those are basically folks, because of the program that they're enrolled in, they'll be able to hunt with a firearm through February 15th due to a special program that they participate in. So very, very few opportunities there to gather more samples.
And my understanding is y'all have already reached out to those clubs and encouraged them to get as many samples in as possible.
The biologists that work with those clubs make personal contact with them. Yes, sir.
Okay. Now, Dr. LaCour, could you tell us, I'll speak for you. We know we got a case of CWD in the state now. We're waiting on a lab that we have no control over to do a confirmation.
Yes, sir.
When we get that back, and you said that's when our CWD plan would go into effect. Tell us briefly what that plan would entail in light of we're at the tail end of the season.
Okay. We have, first of all, we have a meeting already scheduled with other states, primarily Arkansas and Mississippi, where we'll get together and compare strategies and try to overlap our surveillance. Some of these areas, as you well know, on the Mississippi River, Mississippi's got some property on our side. We have some property on their side. There's some logistics to work out. As far as control, that's a hard word to use with CWD. There's some management options that we have that we can use, but they are very few. The tools that we have that we can use, of course, education, that has to be part of it. We need to educate the public. We need to educate hunters to have their animals tested. It's good for them in case they have a positive. That means they don't consume it. It's good for us that we get another sample and we can look at the distribution and prevalence of this disease. So that's a win-win on education. Another tool that we have that we can use, you've already dealt with today, would be a feeding and baiting restriction. As we said earlier, this disease is spread through saliva, urine, and feces. So when you have animals congregated in an area, especially a feed pile, that's an area of high risk where these animals can spread the disease from one to another unnaturally. So that's another tool we have in our toolbox, as they say. Carcass movement restrictions. So currently we don't allow people from out of state to bring a deer head in with the brain in it or to bring in any neural tissue because we don't want them bringing the highest concentration of CWD prions from out of state to our state. Well, the same thing kind of applies in this situation. If we have a positive animal in those areas, if we can get the hunters to debone that animal or quarter it and remove the neural tissue, take the antlers and skull cap off, leave all that stuff in the same area where the deer was harvested, it doesn't spread it, as if they would take that whole deer, the deer head, all that business across the state. This is an area where we have a lot of hunters come from across the state to hunt, especially the refuge system up there. So, we don't want this hunter from Baton Rouge or New Orleans or what have you dragging that all the way across the state. So that is a possibility as well. The department does also have the option of doing sharpshooting. We did that once with the Issaquena case. Doesn't mean we're going to do on this case, but it is a tool that we can use if we need to. Primarily, our goal is to increase hunter harvested samples. That's been working very well for us. It has, it allowed us to get our 340 samples up in the Union and Morehouse parishes very efficiently with minimal cost to us and none to the hunters. And it worked very well. And for sure, we're going to increase our passive surveillance like that in this area. They have options like in other states. Some other states extend the season or extend the limit. We already have a very, very long liberal season, and many of these clubs in this area are in DMAP already. Many of them don't even fill their tags as it is. So that's a tool that's there that we probably won't have to invoke. But I think the overall goal is minimal impact on hunting and to try to get the hunters to help us get our samples. It's just the best of both worlds.
And I guess I'm trying to think in terms of the facts that we have today. But we basically have less than 2 weeks for those 4 tier 1 DMAP clubs in those 2 parishes is the only deer that would be legally harvested for this year. And Mr. Borlon said that we've already reached out to them, and I hope we encourage them to try to fill their tags and shoot as many deer as possible to have as good a sample size.
Yes, sir.
For the rest of that, especially on the, I don't guess the deer that was killed came off of a tier 1 DMAP, huh?
No, sir. No.
Okay.
And additionally, we are picking up road kills throughout the whole year as well. So if there's a roadkill deer, which is a target animal for us, we're picking those up as well.
Okay. So what we'd be talking about, if we put anything in place right now, it would be to a feeding ban and a movement ban. Couldn't move the deer out of those. You'd have to process it yourself or take it to a processor within the parish.
Right. And if someone lived and hunted in the same area, it would be a non-issue. If they're bringing it to their house within that zone, it's not an issue, but trying to just keep people from moving it out of that zone.
Right. And we don't know how many out of parish hunters belong to those.
That's right.
Clubs that are still open.
Yes, sir.
The reason I'm asking those questions is what would, you said when we get that confirmation back, it automatically triggers. What would you need commission action to go ahead and put those things in place today?
I believe so, sir. We'll have to defer to our lawyer, Cole Garrett.
Yes. Okay, so I'm gonna ask for a motion for that, but I think Commissioner Sinceri, you had a question.
Commissioner Reynolds, I think.
Yeah, I had just a
Sure.
sort of a background question. I do a lot of deer hunting like Joe does, and everything. So the incubation period is 16 months to 2.5 years, you said?
16 to 24 months. Yes, sir.
Okay. Once the animal is infected, how quickly can it be detected? And when you get these samples in, and what is the method by which you use to test it? I'm looking at these, I'm thinking, with COVID tests and all that kind of stuff, could there be something that the hunters could have that would, they could test it themselves?
Okay, good question. So it takes probably 3 to 6 months for the prion to show up in the retropharyngeal lymph nodes in the back of the throat. So that is one of the tissues we test. We take both of those lymph nodes out, and we also take the brain stem out of the deer. Currently, there are 2 recognized testing methods for CWD. One is called an ELISA test, and it's a little more sensitive, but it is not as specific. So it's a screening test, if you will. It has to be done on fresh tissues, so you can't put them in formalin. The test that we use is the immunohistochemistry test. It is a little longer process for the test, but it is the gold standard test. And that's why if we'd been using ELISA, there's a fair chance that animal could have been a false positive. With IHC, we're pretty dang sure it's positive even before the confirmatory test at the national lab. Currently, there are no deer-side rapid tests, although there is some research being done at the federal level on going to a different testing platform, which is RT Quick or real-time quaking induced conversion. Probably still not a deer-side test, but it could change our laboratory time significantly if they make that an official test.
Okay.
It's more rapid and it's very, very specific. They can in the research, they even pick up ones that are very, very early positive that our IHC, our current gold standard, can miss. So so that's there. But yes, at this time we have a lag. Typically what we try to do, our biologists take the samples, they ship to us down here in Baton Rouge once a week, comes into my shop. We label them with a laboratory number. We confirm that all the data is cross-referenced and correct on every sample. I drive it over to the veterinary school over here. They go through their processes where they line them up, they put their samples on, they cut them in. The fastest they can do a sample is about 3 days. And they set them up 28 samples at a time. So it is labor intensive. We have had some delays over there this year with some employee issues. They've lost one employee, they had one out on maternity leave. They've since hired another technician that just started this week, but we hope to get all these things kind of leveled out before next year. They also were shut down for a week just a couple of weeks ago with COVID. Their entire lab was affected with COVID. So we've had some delays in testing. Additionally, we prioritized our samples when we got the Arkansas case. Those Union and Morehouse samples got prioritized at the laboratory, moved up to the top of the list. Same when they came up with the Warren County deer over here. We prioritized those samples, and so some of the hunter harvested samples that they're waiting on results, they were kind of pushed back. So yes, the delays were longer than we'd like on people getting their results.
It would be prudent for us to go ahead and get started on this, like Joe was saying.
Yes, sir.
Yes, I agree.
Yes, sir.
McPherson, I have a question.
Yes, sir.
Dr. LaCour, so once you get a positive, it triggers our response. It's triggering the response just in that area? Or
Yes,
is
sir.
it just, it's not a statewide thing, it's just in that 25-mile zone or in the hot zone?
Yeah, that in the 25 miles.
25-mile zone.
Yes.
That's what I just wanted to make certain of.
And to clarify that, it's not just 25 miles. We use a parish boundary.
Use the parish boundaries. Okay, good. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
I know I gave a brief response to you earlier, so my understanding of how the procedure works, the CWD response plan is actually a policy within the Office of Wildlife. The secretary does have emergency authority if the commission fails to take action to start that implementation. Similar to what you just did in the previous agenda item, y'all would ratify it, amend it, take whatever action you deem necessary. Certainly you have the option to preemptively authorize the department to implement that plan with whatever action you take.
I guess, Colonel, I don't know if you have any input because you'd be involved in the enforcement of this. I assume that wouldn't be a problem for y'all.
No, sir, that's not going to be an issue. We'll be able to enforce it.
Okay. And Mr. Secretary and Mr. Undersecretary, I guess y'all don't have a problem with us going ahead and taking that emergency action today, and let's go ahead and get it implemented so that there's no criticism of us being hesitant, waiting on some lab that we have no control over. Any other questions or comments?
Mr.
Commissioner
Chairman.
Sincere?
Thank you. And excuse me if I should know this. Do we require tissue testing on WMAs?
It is not required. We do have staff that mans the managed hunts, and we collect some of our quota samples off the WMAs, though, but it is not mandatory.
Do you have any thoughts on that?
I think that we probably will consider that, especially in these affected WMAs. We certainly have that ability to do that, and we'll try to collect samples. If we have several methods, we can do that to make it easier on the public. So, yes.
Thank you.
All right, so I would entertain a motion for an emergency rule to implement the CWD management plan. So, all right. So Mr. Reynolds make the motions, seconded by Commissioner Blanchard. All those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, thank y'all. You have anything else, Dr. McCord?
No, sir. Thank you for your time.
All right. Next on our agenda is a progress update on the Louisiana National Estuarine Research Reserve. Dr. Robert Twilley. Well, he's coming to the mic. Let me just say that part of what we got to do, and Ed, you hiding behind the post again, but looking at the Facebook post that came out after our press release went out, it's obvious to me that we've got to do a much better job of educating the public on CWD. I was very disappointed in the comments that I saw and the responses I saw to the initial press release on the first suspected case of CWD in the state. All right, thank you, Dr. Twilley.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Commission, for having me back. This is my second briefing, and it's an update on the development of a National Estuarine Research Reserve. And we're very excited about the progress we made, but there's still a lot of work left. So I'd like to come back and just keep you informed, because it really does have some implications or has some benefits that I want you to be aware of related to our activities along the coast. First of all, the National Estuarine Research Reserve, for those who are not familiar with the system, it's a national system that's managed by NOAA. And what they have 30 of these estuarine research reserves around the nation. Actually, Connecticut last Wednesday became the 30th near in the system. They are federal state partnerships. And so there's funding from the national level, matching from the state level. The way that partnership works is that NOAA manages the system and sets the guidelines on what is required in order to become a NER. But the day-to-day operations of a NER are run by the individual states. And so it is a partnership related to both funding and a partnership related to management. We are one of the few states that does not have a NER, as you see in this map. And so we have a particular interest in becoming part of the system. One of the reasons for that is we get to tell our story at a national level. I can tell you from personal experience, a lot of people really do not understand the landscape that's at the mouth of the 7th largest river in the world. We're not the Chesapeake Bay, we're not the Florida Everglades or the Great Lakes. It's a very different system. So being able to participate at the national level among the other estuaries to build this national awareness is actually, I think, a very important component of being a participant in this system. The second thing is that what's very distinct about this system compared to, say, a Sea Grant program that I used to manage and other national programs that are partners with the state, it's a place. It's a very specific site where you put facilities where you can actually encourage the participation of the public and the participation of students in understanding the state and understanding our unique natural resource and what we're doing to conserve it or fix it and continue to use it relative to a recreational value. We have a website. If you ever have questions, I'm going to take just a couple more minutes here today to give you a little bit of an update. But I really encourage Sea Grant host our website. If you go to the Sea Grant website, www.laseagrant.org, just to the left of the icon on the front page of the Sea Grant website is what's called Lanier, the Louisiana National Estuarine Research Reserve. We call it the Lanier Search. And I'll go a little bit about the process of where we are right now. But in the bottom right, there are those 6 panels, or in the bottom, there are 6 panels. The top right panel is our public information panel. And we keep all the meetings, all the things that we're accomplishing step by step. We put summaries, we have what PowerPoint presentations, we actually have recordings and et cetera. So you can see exactly what we've been doing to date to move this process along. Where are we? We are in the step of what we call the nomination. That is where the Governor Edwards, this is required that the governor of states that want to host a NEAR are required to send a letter to NOAA with a letter of interest. NOAA sent back, please move forward. So we've been in a process since then for about 18 months now to find a site, to nominate a site. That's the first aspect. And then as you'll see in this figure, we are in the upper right box, which is just the nomination process. Once you nominate a site, you have to go through a very elaborate process of environmental impact statements, develop a management plan, make sure the state and the federal entities have very clear agreements through the MOUs as to actually what will constitute the day-to-day management of that site, which in nearly all instances is whatever the state present management plans are. That is what's applied to those lands in an MOU with NOAA. And so that's a very elaborate process that takes anywhere, again, another 18 months. And that will start once we nominate a site to move forward. We have, I'm going to show you real quickly in a second. We have 3 sites that we're considering right now, and I'll go through that in just a second. Now, I won't spend any time on, we have a very elaborate set of committees. We have over 70 people that have been involved in developing the technical aspects across the federal agencies, the state agencies, NGOs, and universities. We use the federal guidelines established by NOAA to help develop a site here in Louisiana. NOAA allows us to modify those guidelines related to what's unique to our site or our region. But I just want to real quickly say that, you know, again, the real strong mission here is that education, outreach, interpretation, as well as providing a site for continued research. We have very close relations. We meet monthly with the group at NOAA. So there's a briefing and work with them on a continuous basis so that they following step by step what we're doing in our process here. And one of the aspects of this partnership, since it is a federal state, is that there's a high emphasis on using state lands. And thus, by using state lands as waters that will constitute what will be the site for a NEAR, then that establishes the state's day-to-day management of those lands and waters. And really the way this works is that we use those present management plans. We describe how they're used to fit the mission of a NEAR, and then NOAA says, okay, yes, that qualifies as a National Estuarine Research Reserve. Here are the 3 sites: Atchafalaya Basin, Barataria Basin, Pontchartrain Basin. In red are the state lands, in blue are the state waters. These are all being considered. We don't have any specifics in any one of these 3 basins yet as to what collection of those state lands and state waters we would include in our nomination up to NOAA. We have proposal teams working in each of these 3 areas. They are developing plans and developing ideas. And so that's the stage that we're at right now. is trying to think more clearly exactly how we would take the guidelines from NOAA, take availability of state lands and state waters, and with the existing management plans that are applied to those state lands and state waters, and develop a proposal for a national estuarine research reserve. We are in a very important stage of our process, and that's our town hall meetings. We are now taking these three basins and some ideas of what a NER would look like and the whole concept of a NER, and we're going out in 9 town hall meetings to walk and talk to the public, to get input from them in each of these areas. We've actually held 2 of these already, one in the Pontchartrain area that was Tuesday night. We had 90 participants. These are both in person and hybrid. And yesterday we had one on the Chafalaya. We had 93 people online, which is, I'm really excited. We had, in our first 2, we've had 185 people participating, asking questions, but there's a lot of excitement from those as well. So we have 7 more of these town hall meetings. If you can, I'd love for you to participate in one of these. They are virtual, very easy. The virtual ones we have them both at noon and also 6 to 8. And if you need any information on those, please let me know. We have we have a frequently asked questions document online. I'll just, again, if you send me an email or at deltanear@lsu.edu, we can provide this. This is probably one of our most important aspects of our town hall meetings, is get out there and let's talk about what questions people have and make sure that there's full disclosure with the public on what this process involves. We have an executive committee, members from the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, CPRA, DNR, and Governor's Office of Coastal Activities, as you see here. And this is where the final decision-making is made, is within this executive committee, along with recommendations from the governor. We hope to have a site nominated by June of this year. That's our timeline. So we hope to have final proposals to the executive committee by the 1st of May, deliberations through the month of May and June, and then a final nomination package that goes up to NOAA by June of 22. That, if accepted by NOAA, again, then we start a whole 18-month process of the EIS and the final decisions. Thank you very much. Again, I hope any questions or opportunities to sit in on any of the town hall meetings, we really hope you take advantage. Thank you.
Mr. Chairman.
Commissioner Sincere.
Thank you, Dr. Twilly, for coming here today and talking about this again with the commission. I have a couple of questions, and one of them is a repeat question that I had from last time around. Was that do y'all have the matching funding source tied down or committed? Do you know? Because to me, as a business person, that would be one of the main things I'd want to know. Do we have a regular funding source that's, especially in today's climate, how we're going to be able to support our share, our cost share?
No, it's not defined yet. Largely, that decision is associated with the final management plan of the site, and that depends on which site we select relative to who is the state agency lead, and that's a real big component because there is a 30% match from the state relative to the 70% that comes from the federal government for the annual operations. The annual budget right now from NOAA to run a National Estuarine Research Reserve is about $950,000 per year, just to give you an idea. So that's what we'd have to match because the way this works, there's about $28.5 million that Congress has been funding for all of the NERs. And what they do is they take that funding and divide it by the number. So everybody gets the same amount, whether you're 500 acres or whether you're 1,000,000 acres, you get the same amount of funding to operate your NER. So you can use in-kind contributions. So it can be what the state is already spending that would then be dedicated to the mission of the NER. And that's where a lot of states do through their state agencies, is that they match. There are some that use their university personnel to match some, and there's different agencies across the Gulf Coast. You can look from Texas to Alabama, Mississippi, and Florida. And so, and then there are any new monies that you would need. And so that's the point that you're asking is, okay, well, after all of that, what are the new monies that we're going to need? And that's really, when you, at this process to nominate, we don't get into that detail. Because we really, that's developed through the EIS and management plan. But before the state signs, we'll have those details that we can give you, before a decision is made, if that helps.
I mean, that's real important because you have to define, are you purchasing a place? And if you are purchasing a place, not utilizing an existing facility, then the upkeep costs of maintenance and construction costs and all that stuff. And then as well as maintaining personnel at the facility to conduct, regular business. Those are things, as a business person, I'm gonna look at, where is that gonna come from? And do we have a source of funding that's gonna continue that? Because it's not a one-time
Right.
cost.
So
This goes on for a long time.
right, that's exactly right. And we hope. I'll tell you why my cup is half full is that we have the coastwide reference monitoring system. It's a huge investment by the state. It's one of the most elaborate systems the state is any state, coastal state has invested in. And for example, since a major mission of a NER is managing research sites, all the proposals that we've looked at have several of these CRIMS sites in their area. CRIMS is a coastwide reference monitoring system. Therefore, that's why my glass is half full, because that's part of your match. And that's already an investment by the state. And so I agree 100%, but I am very, we make such great investments in our coastal resources, more than just about any other coastal state. And so I'm very optimistic we can pull this off.
I would like to see, CPRA has decided they're going to fund this or a portion, if LSU is going to fund a portion of it, if the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, Department of Natural Resources through their budget, because it would be really nice to know, because I know we just went through a whole thing and we continue to go through, budget issues at the Department of Wildlife and Fisheries, even though we have had an increase in license fees over the last year. So that's my biggest concern, because it doesn't look like, money is going to always be there.
Right. Again, the way the process will work is that all of that gets laid out before we actually agree to the MOU. So you will see those numbers before the state agrees to what
I would
that commitment is.
suggest then that that executive committee get together on trying to get that information as soon as possible to the commission, so we can see what the plan is on funding.
It's a commitment I'll make.
Any other questions or
I
comments?
got one question.
Yes, sir.
Why is Louisiana the last one?
Well,
I'm looking at this map, and every state of the union that's got water on it.
Yeah.
Water was COVID, one, we never.
Well, Texas was just one of the, I think it was number 28 in developing. We have a very unique, I guess, the way we manage our coast, I don't know, you could argue maybe we've already do enough of these things. We don't really, need it. I've heard all kinds of different statements. I know, with Texas, they had to really manage through navigation issues. They managed through oil and gas issues. They solved all those to put together what the management plans would be to qualify for a National Estuarine Research Reserve. That was a major breakthrough. And the way they did that has really helped us as guidance on what we're looking for and how we're proceeding with this process. So I don't know. That's just what I offer up as, we're a trickier, situation than maybe some other coastal states. But, we also do a lot already in our coast. And, so there's also, you can argue that, there's already a lot there. Our strategy here is what we call value added. We've got existing facilities, we've got existing programs. And so, what does this bring to the table that actually adds value to what we have? And maybe it was just the riches of our values that we had before this, that, this is now something, I think with where we're at, that there's a lot of excitement.
Any other questions or comments? Let me ask you, Dr. Quilly, you had it on one of your slides, you had either the same or a couple of different
Yes.
facilities. Is that representative of
That's
the
exactly.
way you house these? Where
That's
are
right.
these at,
That's right. The top picture there is, I think, is the Mission Aransas. That's the site in Texas. It's actually managed by the University of Texas. That was in your top picture. At your bottom picture in those pair is Grand Bay, just over in Mississippi. And if you take one of the first exits when you cross into Alabama, it's not a very long drive. Beautiful spot. They have an excellent program getting the kids out to the marsh and seeing the wetland areas. And that's the Grand Bay Estuarine Research Reserve. We have a little Gulf of Mexico Estuarine Research Reserves. We have a little group where we meet with them periodically, and they have been a tremendous help helping guide us through this process, and also identifying the value of what they bring with their existing partners with their state agencies. And so there's a lot out there to learn from.
Well, it's an exciting project, but I do like Commissioner Sinceri's deal is that somewhere maybe up front instead of towards the lag, we think about the local match and where we come. We just went through a funding crisis here, and so we got good representation, which I like to see, but I also like to see if we're going to be called on for part of that. And we've got a number of facilities on the coast already, and even if you built adjacent to one, with security and maintenance and everything. And in Louisiana, we know we got to rebuild them about every third year anyway with the hurricane. So,
well, one of there's facilities enhancement program that NOAA offers up as well, and the match is only 5%, I believe, on facilities. And so the 70-30 split is on day-to-day operations, but they actually put up more of the funding when it comes to adding facilities to your site. So that's, I think those, again, having those facilities together with our existing facilities, that's where I think, you defined as value added.
And the last question is, you've got to pick an estuary. It can't be the coast of Louisiana.
That's right. And that's a really good question. And we've heard a lot about that. Why don't we just put all three of the basins? They all deserve it. So we learned from North Carolina. North Carolina tried that, where the three aquaria are located. They said all three of these are going to be one National Estuarine Research Reserve. Well, you only get one check. You got to split it across wherever you decide to put your Estuarine Research Reserve. Florida did the opposite. They actually established 3 different estuarine research reserves. They get 3 checks. So, and there's nothing that says that we can't go after a second or a third one.
But you're splitting the money by
But you
that.
split the money. So if you only have one reserve, you get one check. And so if you go 3 basins, you're splitting that check among those 3 basins. And so, so our strategy has been, let's be very specific. Let's make sure we fund it properly, but also let's leave all this work we're doing open for maybe what could be subsequent moves.
No other questions or comments. We'll move on. Thank you, Dr. Quilly. Appreciate the presentation. Mr. Adrians, you want to talk a little bit about your favorite subject?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commissioners. And I too would like to welcome our new commissioners like Mr. Tuma. I've got a few frequent flyer miles in front of this commission and likely a few more to go.
Get blown up on your centimeters and millimeters.
That's right. That's right. Okay, so what we have here is just to catch y'all up a little bit. We've the past two years we've been discussing trout. We've done 2 stock assessments. In those 2 years, they both came back with very similar results of overfished and overfishing. We've gone over management measures in the past, and more recently in November, you all asked us to come back quarterly and provide you some updates with data. So this is the first of these updates. And what this is mostly going to be is the remainder of that data through 2021 that we didn't have in November, putting that in the historical context. We looked at a few other things that we had discussed in the past in relation to salinity, and we put those in some graphics instead of just discussing those with you. And then we'll get to some anecdotal type data that we found and we thought might shed a little light on this as well. So I'll start off with management history. These are the conservation measures that have happened over time with spotted sea trout. You can see there in the late 70s was the 50 fish creel limit, and that was split between redfish and trout, a commercial size limit. In the early 80s, the recreational limit. In the late 80s, that commercial limit changed again in the late 80s. The 25 fish, the current 25 fish bag limit came into play in the late 80s as well. So there, and that was the last recreational change. So that's about 34 years ago that we last had some recreational management measures. And then since that, there were some more changes to the commercial regulations, the biggest one being the entanglement net ban, which effectively, you'll see what that did to commercial landings in the next few slides. And here we are in 2022 and things are yet to be determined. So this is spawning stock. Actually, the slide says spawning stock size, but we've graphed the spawning potential ratio over there. It's the point of the slide is still the same. We've graphed some of those, we've indicated some of those management measures along this graphic. And you can see when management measures were put in place, the stock obviously had a response to those, and that SPR continued to rise through the 2000s. And then we've taken that decline to where we are right now. So these are landings over time through 2021. And we put those as a proportion. It's a proportion commercial versus the proportion recreational. So it's 100% of the landings, and you can see there what is commercial, what is recreational, and effectively the commercial is so low now that it's virtually non-existent. And at the average of the commercial landings at the time they were really going was about 20% of the harvest. So let's look at some fishery trends. So recreational catch, here's that graphic you all have seen numerous times now, where we show you the harvest and the discards. We have complete 2021 numbers on there, so you can see those landings still remain relatively low. Some of the lowest years we've seen, except in the early 80s. recreational effort. This is an effort graphic just to show you kind of what's gone on with recreational effort in terms of it peaked closer to the late 20 teens. It has leveled off slightly. However, those trends, got some numbers here, sorry. That effort has increased about 10% roughly on average in the last 3 years, even though you see that 2021 decline. However, we talked about that recently, how that effort decline is there, but we also have a landings decline, and they're proportional, and we'll see some angler catch per unit effort in a later slide. Actually, the next slide. So this is that recreational angler catch per unit effort. So this is kind of what, when I talk about how successful those anglers are on a trip, you can see there prior to recent years, that catch per angler was roughly 5 fish. That's dropped to about 3 fish in recent years. So that CPUE continues to trend down. So this takes that shift in effort and landings. You can put them in relative terms. So you can see while landings are down, effort was also down, but overall per trip, these anglers are being less successful. They're bringing back fewer trout. So this is the age composition that in the landings that we've discussed, and this is the complete data through 2021. And like that 2020 data we presented in November, you can see there was a fair amount of harvest in the last 2 years on those age 2 fish, that green portion of that graphic. And if you recall, I don't have the slide here, but if you recall when we talked about the proportion of those age 2s in the stock, they're about 20% of the overall stock. However, they make up roughly 40% of the current harvest. So they're being removed disproportionately from the stock. So these are those, this is zooming in on that age 3+ composition. So those older, bigger trout, just looking at that, we've drawn a line there across that recent trend. You can clearly see that downward trend, and you can see it's a little reflective of that effort. We had increased effort. Populations were good. Folks were seeing some more, and now we're in the state where we are. And you can see that age 3+ continues to trend down. So we had discussed in the past with questions that you all had provided us about salinity and differences that may exist. So we decided to look at some of those trends in relation to salinity. And the first one here is that same age 3+ composition. And what we did is looked at lacreel sites. So sites where anglers come back with fish, and these are sites where folks were fishing in greater than or equal to 15 parts per thousand. And you can see we have that downward trend still over time, same trend. We also looked at those same sites that are less than 15 parts per thousand. And you can see there's that same trend that exists, whether you're in those saltier waters or more brackish, less salty. So the trend is the same regardless of the salinity level. So now we're going to move into those gill net surveys. As I talked about in November, we had the 2021 gill net indices run. I just didn't have them graphed for you. And I had indicated to you at that time that those were down. And you can see this is that largest panel in the gill net. And you can see here where that 2021 point has dropped down again. And you can see that trend line in there over time. So here's that middle size panel that we discussed as well, same trend. And you can see that 2021 point down from compared to the 2021 point, sorry, compared to the 2020 point. And then that smallest mesh here, you can see this will change a little bit when we look at salinity, and this is the standardized one, but you can see it's come down as well again. This is the smallest panel in our gill net. When you look at it this way, standardized, it's not quite as much of a downward trend as you would see if you plotted these when you don't standardize them. There is a downward trend. if you're not using the standardization over time, what we would call a nominal index. So we decided to also look at these gillnet trends by salinity like we did the landing access sites. And so when you look at it by that largest panel in the gillnet in sites that are greater than 15 parts per thousand or equal, you can see that downward trend over time. Same thing in the less than 15 parts per thousand for the large mesh. I'm not going to spend too much time on these. You can see this is the greater than 15 parts, less than 15, same trends. And then this is that smallest panel, greater than 15 parts. It's got that downward trend slightly, not as great as the others, but it's there. And then this is less than 15 parts per thousand. So the other thing that's essentially the department data that we have that we gather. These are some of the things that go into a stock assessment. In November, we had talked about, is there any other data we could find? So we actually did a little bit of a deep dive and went to look at what might be reflective of what we might consider some more avid anglers that might be a little better than the average trout fisherman. So we found some historical tournament data online. This is and I'll caveat this with, this is the data those organizations put online. We did not solicit it. It was publicly available. First one that we looked at was the CCA star, and we looked at the overall results. This is the winning trout in all regions over time, plotted. And you can see that downward trend in weight. We also broke it out. This is the Southwest and West regions. You can see that same trend. This is the Southeast and East regions, same trend. And we also pulled the Grand Isle Tarpon Rodeo results, and you can see that same trend there. So reflective of what we're seeing in our samples is what those winning trout coming to the dock are showing by those records. And that's the update we have for you this go around. I'll take any question.
Questions, comments? So the news hadn't changed, it's still bad.
News hasn't changed.
But it's consistent.
It's consistent.
Okay. So at some point, your recommendation is we still do something.
That is our recommendation.
All right. Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Okay, striped mullet.
Yes, sir. I don't have a presentation for this one. This is one you all see annually. It's we come to you with the striped mullet assessment and ask for your approval to transmit that to the legislature. The status of this fishery has not changed in a while. It is still in very good shape. It is not overfished. It's not undergoing overfishing. The SPR at the time of this assessment, the spawning potential ratio was 59%. I believe last year was 60 or 61. So this really hasn't changed. And some of the fishery dynamics in recent years and the recent decade, the way they are, we just don't see the harvest we used to commercially of this species. And I'll take any questions.
Any questions, comments? Yes, sir.
I just got one. Do you know how many of licensed strike people we have that's licensed Louisiana and out of state licenses?
Correct. There's approximately 46 of those mullet strike net permits available or that are held, and that's gone down. That was as of, I believe that's through the 2019 data. I don't know that the 2020 was updated yet. But for example, 5 or 6 years ago, that was up near 100.
Right.
So it's going down.
It's going down.
Correct.
Any other questions? What does striped mullet used for? I mean, it used to be somewhat more significant than it is now. Nothing like pogie industry, but
Correct. It has mainly become a roe fishery. It's harvested now for the roe and that gets processed. It's made into a product called bogatera, if I pronounce that correctly, but they'll dry and press the roe and then it's used as seasoning in dishes. But a lot of that processing has started to shift to South America or overseas. And there's a lot of Taiwanese aquaculture and Australia wild caught mullet. They have a pretty big industry.
so it's just an economic factor. We're getting beat out by the foreign countries that can process it cheaper than we can here.
That, and I think with this in this assessment, the landings through 2019 or the 2020 data, I'm sorry, were the lowest we've seen. I think it was about 1,200 pounds.
But even though the commercial landings are down and have stayed down, your samplings that the resources is fine.
Correct.
Why are we submitting this report to the legislature? That was a mandate by the legislature?
It is a mandate to submit it annually. That came into place during the entanglement net discussions, I believe, that was put in as an annual. We're looking at trying to get that on the cycle with the other assessments. So it's every 5 years.
That was going to be my suggestion. So you preempted me there. Mr. Sincere.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I mean, it's almost being that the trend has changed so much since this was implemented as a law. It seemed as though this might be work that might not be necessary anymore. And it might be something that we want to look at as a request to the legislature to actually take that mandate off. That's a suggestion, Mr. Chairman.
Speak on that, Mr. Chairman. Federal 2020 legislative session to move to a 5-year increment instead of an annual increment. Because of COVID, we did not move forward with that bill, and we have resubmitted to the governor's office as an initiative for this year to put it on a 5-year rotation.
I'll just, before we leave this, say that. All right, any other questions or comments? Thank you very much.
Thanks. If we could get a motion.
Oh, you need
possibly
that?
to-
Okay. Do I hear a motion to receive and accept the stock assessment report? Mr. Reynolds moves and Mr. Hogan seconds. All right, all those in favor signify by saying aye. All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, the last item on our agenda.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, sir. I'm sorry.
I'd like to address the issue you raised about Facebook and stuff. I'd like to give Ed Pratt, who's in charge of our PR, an opportunity to respond and maybe provide you some information that y'all weren't aware of.
Okay, thank you.
Trying to make sure it's not afternoon. Good morning. I don't speak a lot about what we do in my department, but I have an incredible staff, and they do yeoman's work. And I can call them at 6 o'clock in the evening and in the morning to get something out, and they do that. But I just want to say something good about them, as far as, especially with this the CWD issue, which we have done an incredible amount of education. Now, people on social media that make comments, some of those comments, people get brave on social media and say things that they wouldn't say normally in front of anybody. And they find an avenue to say negative things on there. But as far as the work that my staff has done to educate people on CWD, it goes without saying. We have done overly. We've done an over amount. In September, Dr. LaCour was on our program. We do a program twice a month, 30 minutes at least, And his spot in September was on a chronic wasting disease. He did a great job. We make him available to any media that calls about chronic wasting disease, and nobody can give a better description of that than him. And Jonathan is a close second. And Jonathan does the same thing. We make him available all the time for stuff like that. Matter of fact, we made Dr. Cools available for the media yesterday on this question about CWD. And you heard the thing this morning. If you go to our website, we have an incredible amount of information on CWD. And every time we put out a press release on CWD, we have a link that these people can go there. We also have a video for the hunters, what they can do when they get a deer that they believe is affected by CWD. They can go there anytime. That's available. The 30-minute or 35-minute show that Dr. LaCour did specifically on CWD is available on our website anytime somebody wants to take a look at it. So that's available. But the amount of work that the staff has done. Oh, one other thing. We got a grant recently for $25,000. And all that grant was about was CWD messaging. And we used that. We use every bit of that $25,000. My staff is just amazing in getting that information out to the public about CWD. And we are unrelenting on getting that information out. Now, no matter what we do, social media is a bastion of craziness. And it doesn't matter how great we are, how succinct we are in getting our message out. There will be people who say they don't understand, they don't get it, and they'll say things that don't make sense. We can't not deal with that. But as far as the information, if you go to our website, there is so much information on CWD, testing results, CWD facts, CWD information. What is LWF doing about CWD? Cervid caucus importation regulations. That's just part of it. But I'm saying this because the people that work with me, they are awesome. They are just great in getting information out. And on CWD, they have taken this a step further. You will not find any department that deals with CWD, whether it be Arkansas, Texas, Mississippi, any of those places that deal with this and their response and getting that information out better than my people. I felt a need to say that, and it's not challenging anybody, but I'm just going to say on the record that we have gone on social media, on our Facebook page relentlessly talking about CWD. We have tweeted about CWD. We cannot get any more information out there, and it's succinct as good as we've done. We just can't exceed that, but we will continue. And I make no bones about it. By the way, we have more money coming. Renee Leverton does a great job of getting grants and stuff for us. And we have some more money coming that we're going to develop more with CWD animations. That's going to be out there with more information. And I just feel I had this, I mean, I've exceeded my time, but I felt that I had to talk about how we get our information out, how quickly we get that information out, and how good that information is about CWD. And we will continue to do that. And so if there's any questions about, whatever that is that people are talking about on social media, whatever, questioning us on that, trust me, they're not getting close to the information we're putting out there, and we're doing the best we can with that. And I think the best we can is as good or better than anybody else has done in getting that information out. So that's Ed's press comment for today.
Numerous occasions I've called Ed at 11 o'clock, 12 o'clock at night, said I want something on the media first thing in the morning, or I want it put on our website immediately. And his people have responded weekends, all times of day. So I think it's sometimes with all the social media going out there, and with all I'm gonna call them crazies, because Because I'll tell you, some of the stuff I've seen on Facebook, it can only come from people that are not fully functional. I'm going to say, I'm going to give them a little slack on that. But our people we can only do so much, and our people have done a yeoman's job when it comes to getting messages out. 24 hours a day. You know, I've had calls from some past commissioners concerned about certain things being put on Facebook, on our website, about information that people needed, and they responded immediately, took care of it, got it out there. And so, you know, I don't know how much more we can do. We can bring the horse to the water. We just can't make him drink.
Well, Mr. Secretary, Ed, I'm gonna tell you, it sounds like since you made eye contact with everybody in the room except for me, I assume that you felt obligated to defend your staff and your work because of my comments, and you completely misconstrued my comments. I have nothing but compliments for you and everyone else on what we've done on trying to get the word out on CWD, but you missed the message. For all of our best efforts, we've failed. The public, to a large degree, from what I saw on Facebook, does not understand the CWD issue. That's going to take enforcement efforts when they're going around talking to people and all to get that message out. It's going to take the work that we were talking about Mr. Boardlaw and his staff doing as they visit with DMAP Club, but it's probably going to have to be more targeted and more specific than what we've done in the past. But I in no way meant to impugn or to say that y'all haven't done a great job in I&D on getting the information out. But when they talk about us coming to our website and when they listening to our conservationist news notes that you were referring to and all, I'll tell you a little story. My first race, that wasn't just yesterday, my first political race, I was exhausted. I had been out there beating the pavement every day and all, and I was sitting in a chair in the office, and this fella came in and said, "What you doing in here?" I said, "Man, I am beat. I am wore out." He said, "Well, let me tell you something, Joe." He said, "Go out there right to that corner and start shaking hands and see how many people come by and know who you were at and what your office you're running for." But he made that point that always stuck with me to where I never lost a Senate race. Because I went out that corner, I started shaking hands for the last day of the race. But that's the attitude that we've got to take with CWD in the state. But it's going to take everyone's efforts, not just I&E, not hoping that they're going to come to us for the information, but how well we can disseminate that information. And Ed, you and your staff have done a great job, everything I think you can do in I&E, but it's probably going to take responding to some of this craziness, some of this ignorance, lack of intellect regarding this disease, because to me, it's scary. Tell me what the economic impact is of deer hunting in the state of Louisiana. It's hundreds of millions of dollars.
330 million last 2010.
Yeah. So it's that important from an economic standpoint to those of us who consider ourselves avid deer hunters. It's our life. It's our recreation. It's what I want to do. So that's all my only point. And if I said anything that got your attention, I hope it was in a positive light, that we've all got to do our part to support you and your people in their efforts to educate the public.
Thank you.
Okay, we do have another person would like to speak under public comments, and that's Doug Daigle on hypoxia funding.
Thank you. I just need a minute. Doug Daigle, the coordinator of the Louisiana Hypoxia Working Group housed over at LSU. And the commission's one of the numerous bodies in the state that have helped support the Gulf Hypoxia Action Plan through resolutions over the number of years. And this is a cooperative effort that the state and the upriver states and the federal agencies have been involved in since 1997. So just wanted to give you an update. In the infrastructure bill that passed, the bipartisan infrastructure bill, Senator Cassidy inserted a funding provision specific to the states on this hypoxia task force to help them carry out the hypoxia action plan. So that money is going to be coming available. Louisiana is one of the states that's going to be receiving it. So that's good news. And Representative Graves put a provision in the House Environment budget to try to provide some additional money for that. That budget hasn't passed yet, but if it does, that will be an additional source of income. And there's other things that we don't need to go into, but there's a lot of funding moving, and there are opportunities there that can help us and the other states to carry out that plan. So I just wanted to pass that along. One other one that is of interest that you're aware of, because you've also over the years passed resolution supporting it, is the Land and Water Conservation Fund, which has been around since 1965. And Louisiana and the other states are getting millions in additional dollars each year now for that fund. Those monies come from offshore oil production revenues. So the department has utilized that fund in the past. I don't think they have that much in recent years because there's been a lot of other revenues coming from the Restore Act and things like that. But it's something to keep in mind for the department to look at. So anyway, I'm happy to answer any questions, and I'm always here as a resource for information if anyone has any.
Any comments, questions for Mr. Dagan? We always appreciate a little good news. Thank you so much. Thank you for being here. Are there any other public comments? All right, with that, I would accept a motion to adjourn.
Motion.
And second, we are adjourned. Thank you all.